All right, we're starting off the last session of 2017 Worldwide Public Sector Summit. Thank you for staying with us all day. My name's Doug Van Dyke. I'm the General Manager and Director of AWS Federal Civilian and Nonprofit segments. I also run business development for our GovCloud region, and I am a panel moderator during these events. So I love this, my favorite part of my job. We're talking today about how federal customers are transforming in the cloud. And I know you all are federal employees, and so you can't endorse Amazon openly, but I really appreciate the willingness to be on stage, sharing your experiences with moving your organizations into the cloud, lessons that you've learned, and some best practices. I am going to quiz the audience after this is over, so hopefully everyone pays attention. And I have a task. I am going to do some of the introductory questions, but I would like all of you to be thinking of questions that you can ask our panelists, because I find the most value, and I've heard from audiences, the most value is gained from the interaction, you coming up with the questions for the panel, and I'd like to encourage that as much as possible. So I'm going to start with asking Carl to do a brief introduction, who you are, where you work, and how you're helping your organization modernize in the cloud.
Cool. Hi, my name is Carl Massa. I work at the Ministry of Justice in the United Kingdom. It is a ministerial department that encompasses quite a few agencies. It's the Courts and Tribunal Service, Prison and Probation Service, pretty much the whole life cycle of justice beyond an arrest. So our users are they don't necessarily want to be our users, but when they need us, they need us, and they need us fast. How we're transforming there, we've, for several years now, we've had an initiative that came out of the Cabinet Office, which is our central department, and Government Digital Service is what it was, and it was all about bringing in private sector people to start trying to build in new ways and create IT arrangements that were more beneficial to us. We had started off as a sort of small, scrappy unit. We put them in the corner, and away they went, hived off their budget and let them get on with things. But now, 3 years on, it's bleeding out everywhere now. So now it's more beyond the how do we build something in the cloud to how do we manage and how do we scale and how do we build a large institution that can continue to iterate all those services on a really broad scale. Because actually, although we're government, we think we're very special. We do very simple stuff just over and over at scale. Document stores, CMS management system, payments in, payments out, kind of stuff. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's what we do.
I look forward to hearing more about that. Bill Marion.
All right, I get the mic. So like here. Bill Marion, Deputy CIO for Air Force, long title up there, but basically the IT and cyber support for across the Air Force. Just to put in context, very global scale as well. About 700,000 endpoints on our unclassified network and over 100,000 on some of our classified networks. So scale is very important to us. There's a lot of technology providers out there, but being able to deliver IT at scale, at enterprise speeds, and with the agility is really, really key to us. Our journey really started about 2 years ago across all avenues. So infrastructure as a service, a lot of our applications were aging, cybersecurity issues. So how do we modernize them in a new world era? And then on the SaaS side, principally things like Office 365, we're making a major movement of trying to get those things off-prem and moved, and we're on great movement on those areas. Really, cloud is part of a larger initiative for us, which is, as a Air Force, our core competency is not delivering IT. It should enable all of our missions. And so outsourcing, moving, commoditizing IT is very principal to our business right now. Focus on the applications, let industry drive the innovation in the infrastructure and leverage that because we're really trying to free up all of our airmen into the cybersecurity business and do the cyber weapon systems and cyber operation world that is very much front and center in every bit of operations day in, day out. So that transformation of IT isn't just about how to provide more security, more agility, more speed. It's also how do we transform our workforce in delivering cyber effects as part of our multi-domain fight. So we'll cover a lot of different things on strategy today, but I'll give you that as a nutshell up front.
Thank you, Bill. And Paul Franson from the Smithsonian.
Okay, yeah, so I'm Paul Franson. I'm a research data scientist at the Smithsonian Institution. So most of you probably know the Smithsonian Institution because of our 19 museums. You probably go to those on the National Mall. Most of those are affiliated with the Smithsonian. But we also have 9 research centers, and the National Zoo is also part of the Smithsonian. So kind of our mission is to increase and diffuse knowledge. And so in the research computing side of things, which is kind of the department that I work in, we spend a lot of time trying to increase knowledge by coming up with software development for new ways to handle big data, and we also are interested in diffusing that. So having the data available, data across America's national treasures available to people. And so we've been using the cloud in some of our research computing type things to kind of enable that mission.
All right. Thank you, Paul. And Sarah Fadden. Fadden, sorry.
Yeah. So I'm Sarah Haddon, and I work at the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is under the Department of Homeland Security. And I'm responsible for the verification program on the OIT, the Office of Information Technology side. So we primarily use the cloud. I mean, that's the question, right? How are we using cloud? We actually transitioned, we are modernizing the E-Verify and SAVE applications. If any of you are familiar with that, E-Verify is used for employment verification, and the SAVE application is used to validate immigration status for all of the benefit granting organizations like the DMVs or Affordable Care Act and welfare and health and human services, et cetera. So we are in the middle of modernizing our applications, and we moved into AWS to do so. We've modernized about 5 or 6 major pieces, and we will have moved the legacy app to the cloud as of this Friday at 9 p.m. So we'll be completely out of data centers as of Friday. But we've been using it to do all of our modernization efforts, which we recently achieved continuous deployment for anything that's modernized, and that includes public-facing apps and the internal app that we're completely done building. And so what that means is that we deploy to production numerous times a day, and we also use toggles for features and things like that, and of course Docker containers and all the fancy fun stuff.
Sarah, what an exciting milestone that's happening this Friday at 9 p.m.
Yes.
Can I ask you, what were some of the lessons? I mean, was this an application that started in the cloud, or was it
No.
It was a migration from on-premise? What were some of the lessons that you learned along the way?
There's 2 efforts going on,
Okay.
because we can't just have one at a time.
All right.
There has to be multiple spanning efforts. And so what happened is we started modernizing, and we ripped off one piece at a time. And those pieces we would build in the cloud, and they would connect back to the database, which is, we started with this really old Oracle legacy database where all of the application logic is in the database pretty much. And so we're slowly ripping that apart. And we decided last year that we needed to think about, also working a little bit on the legacy system. We shut down, I think, about 5 different pieces of the legacy app. It had a lot of different moving parts. And we decided that it would be beneficial for the teams as we continue to modernize for both applications, the legacy and the modernized pieces, to be in the same environment, and for them both to be in AWS. And also for cadence purposes, so that we could automate more of even the legacy app, so that we could, they could both move in parallel. Because we're refactoring at the same time while we're modernizing, right? We're basically changing the wheels on the bus while the bus is in motion. And so it's a pretty complicated process. Lessons learned, I think that one of the things that we do really well is we have 4 different vendors that are involved in this effort, and we all really work well as a team. I'm not saying that it's always perfect, but we have, for example, every Monday an architecture meeting for about 3 hours, which is, brings us all together as one team. And so, we take a very green approach to things. It's a consensus kind of thing. We bring a problem up to the group, and then we all work together to come up with the technical solution or the solutions that we could use, and then talk about which one would work best. And so I think that that's probably the biggest lesson learned for why we are so successful at what we're doing.
Thank you. So, Paul, you talked about different parts of the Smithsonian. Are there some areas in your organization that you're using the cloud to do some exciting modernizations?
Yeah, sure. So kind of mostly what I've been involved in is the research side of things. And even research at the Smithsonian spans a huge variety of different things. We have the Astrophysical Observatory in Cambridge, Massachusetts, all the way down to the Tropical Research Institute in Panama, and Conservation Biology Institute in Front Royal, Virginia. So there's all sorts of different data coming in, and some of those data are really important, such as genotypes of endangered species or something, and we want to have ways to kind of rapidly assay that and analyze it and be able to get it back to the people who are making conservation decisions. And so having the ability to be flexible and to scale up fast is really important. So in our work, kind of a lot of the stuff that we've traditionally done has been on high performance computing systems, which are great. You get bare metal speeds, you can do a lot with them. But also, they can fill up, or you have to call a sysadmin to try and get different software installed and stuff like that. And so we've really been trying to leverage the cloud to allow us to not wait in a queue at a high performance computing facility, or be able to really scale out seemingly to infinity if we have highly parallel applications that we can use. And so we've found genes in a genome of an endangered species, and we've also done all sorts of other things using kind of our little foray into the cloud so far in research. And so I think really the sky's the limit with what you can do. There's a lot of opportunity and cool data that we can work on at the Smithsonian. So.
All right, so Jurassic Park is real, right?
Not quite yet.
Next project?
We'll see.
We'll see.
Well, the Dinosaur Hall is open in 2019, so maybe.
Okay. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Bill, so there are a lot of different reasons that we've heard organizations are looking to modernize, cutting costs, increasing security, or just scaling out. What are some of the reasons that you are aspiring to achieve, and what are some of the actual benefits that you've had by modernizing?
Certainly the obvious one is agility and speed. We spend a lot of time in government provisioning environments and less so on the application themselves, so kind of flipping that whole equation to getting to where we're rapidly deploying basically the infrastructure that runs those applications and spending most of our time on the application space. So one of our recent endeavors, we went into a SaaS environment on our major HR application. So our front-end portal to 1.7 million users. So you can imagine the scale of that. That would normally be a 2 or 3 year infrastructure project, not to mention the application side. We went end-to-end on the entire piece from infrastructure to stand up in 9 months, including ATO. And really only a month of that was the infrastructure instantiation piece of that. We never would have done that before. I mean, that's just scale that we could never have gotten to. But even more importantly, I would say, is the cloud piece, again, is not focusing as much on the infrastructure, let industry do what they do best in that space, and really allowed us to focus down on the application and all the functionality we're delivering. So in my previous job, I was the A1, which is our pay and personnel side. The resounding support from the executives all around was like this big burden was lifted off their shoulders, because I wasn't worried about whether the application was running or not. I was worried about delivering more and more functionality at speed, which is ultimately why we were there. So I would say that was the principal one from a functional perspective, is getting to the application delivery to the end customer. Because if you don't do that, it doesn't matter how good your infrastructure is. And like I said, I mentioned the other very strategic piece is it allows industry to do what they do best at scale with the repeatability and the scalability and the price points that the government really needs to get at. And then it frees up those resources also very much so on the cybersecurity business. So a lot of those skill sets of how we secure our data, how we do kind of our views on the application security, we simply don't have enough resources in a sequestration environment. We had to lift some burden somewhere else to put it there, and so let industry do what they do well, and then let us refocus that manpower somewhere else.
Thank you, Bill. So Carl, being an innovator, modernizing is tough. There's a famous quote Jeff Bezos says, if you don't like criticism, for God's sake, don't do anything innovative. And I think that rings pretty true. So you all are modernizing, you're leaders. What are some of the areas that you've had to accept criticism and just weather through with modernizing?
Assurance, accreditation, a permission to go live.
We only have 33 minutes. No,
yeah, I was going to say, wow.
The list just keeps getting longer.
Yeah, all of it. But I think.
So how do you weather through those?
It's a case-by-case basis, I think. For each, I've had the opportunity to work in several departments, and I think it's getting to understand sort of the assurance and compliance regimes. In some cases, I think you have some people in that space that are much more interested in getting to the bottom of it as opposed to a tick box exercise. I mean, I don't want to slag off a whole industry here, but I think for us it was often trying to make the connections with the people where we could have very candid and frank conversations about what their concerns were. Because I think for us, 5 years ago especially, but even still happens now to some degree, the emotional response of so we're going to go to the cloud. Our data, our prison data, is going to live in a cloud. It's not going to be somewhere in a room where I can go look and see flashing lights and know that something's happening, right? And for me, it's getting over that emotional response. We've been very lucky there. We have NCSC, which is our national cybercrime, their cyber resources unit, and they've worked closely with us over the years. They put forward what was called the cloud security principles, which were not standards, not guidelines, not tick box exercises, just a very practical approach to here's the things that you should be thinking about when you're building in these environments. But I think sometimes the way to get over that hurdle is just demonstrating, and you mentioned 9 months for a project that you would anticipate would take 3 years. I think you do that enough times and it starts to thaw, right? They begin to realize that you really are delivering value. And as you said, it's not about the building of the infrastructure, it's not about any of that, it's about enabling those developers to create better services for the end user. And most of them come around, I think, over time. You pick your allies and make your cases on a case-by-case basis but I think it was for us just listening to their concerns and then trying to work with them to unpick that first guttural response of, oh, it's bad because it's not the world I understand.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm going to put this next one out to any of the panelists who'd like to start. One of the things that is the hardest with modernizing or innovating is taking risks and failing. Are there any situations, and I think the audience is looking for lessons learned along the way. Are any of you willing to speak about potentially a failure or a pretty profound lesson learned, a word of warning that you would share with the audience? This happened to us. I wish if I could go back and do it over, or all of the work we're doing going forward, we will do this way because of this lesson learned.
I'm willing to answer that question. So we started out our modernization project and we said we were going to track metrics, and there were so many things going on because we were just starting out. We were building things in AWS. We were setting up our VPCs and doing all of that stuff. And we didn't put, I sort of in my mind thought that tracking the metrics was going to be this really simple task, and not realizing that we would have to go back and actually modify the code on the legacy system to get the baseline because it didn't track those metrics already. It didn't have that specific data. And it took months to get that initial data set, and it held us back from going live and being able to, we went live anyways, but we couldn't really track all of our improvements immediately without it. And so that would be my biggest lessons learned. Now we track, everything is, do we have the metrics, and let's capture that right away, right at the start of the project, or even before the project begins, so that we can keep tracking it. And we've learned a lot of things from that as well, even tracking on the modernized side. If there's an issue with the system and the metrics start to change, you can see that. And so the issue may not be obvious, and then you start to see these numbers go up. For us, it's tracking time it takes to process a case, or time it takes to enroll into the system, things like that. And so if we start to see those numbers go up, something's wrong. It's a good indicator. And so we track metrics on absolutely everything. Big data really is the future, I believe, of everything that we're going to be doing.
Thank you. Bill, it looks like you're...
I think we're all chomping at the bit on that one. Lessons
I
learned.
I thought it was going to be crickets. You guys are all...
No, that's
very cathartic,
really
isn't
question.
it? Just get it out.
Just get it out.
Share it with your friends.
I wouldn't say it was a failure. I would say it's a couple of things I'll highlight are the challenges along the way. Because first off, my first word of advice is don't blink. If you believe it's the right thing to do, you can't blink with the workforce, right? If you know it's the right strategy. And so in our case, cloud is new in the federal space. The policies are new, the processes are new. And so one of the things that is kind of a humor story now, but it was real, we had signed out there was a DoD policy on here's what you have to do to get connected to the cloud. The interesting thing is there was actually no one that could actually approve the document. So we had a policy that says you must do X, Y, and Z, and we did it, and we said, who signs it? And they said, I don't know who signs it. We didn't get that far. You're the first one. And so we literally just had to keep driving home, not blink. It says, we are going to get to the bottom of this. And so leadership's very important, where you stay committed to the end state. If you know it's the right thing to do for that application and for your customer, don't blink, and you got to keep driving through it. The other piece I would say is use the facts to your benefit. There's a lot of people scared of the cloud. There's a lot of anecdotals out there. We use the facts. When we went through the 3PAO process, the third-party approval process, We used the security validation processes. I mean, we had the security posture of that cloud application was far and beyond everything else that we had running.
Exactly.
And literally use that over and over and over to communicate, to say, you are accepting less risk, I would argue, than many cases of some of the DoD applications that are out there. And so use the facts, have people that you can arm on your side that can truly understand those branches and sequels of the rules and how you're applying them. It is different. So we just got out of the SCCA DoD kind of configuration piece, and this means this equals this. And so you're not accepting a different risk, it's just named differently. And so having the technical foundation to do it. So leadership and understanding the actual technical risk and then staying with it if it's the right answer for you.
All right, I have other questions, but if one of you is very eager to share.
I got to share one because I can save you a bunch of time and money. You've touched on it twice, the commodity. When we started at GDS 5 years ago, we hired really talented people from the private sector. All of us were brought in from private sector and open source. We had a lot of momentum behind us, and we went, we're going to build everything. We're going to do it ourselves. We want to take control. And because one challenge for us was we have many system integrators with many levels deep. You know, this one company and they rent rack space from somebody else, and it takes forever to get anything done. You have to pay to even talk to them about changing or iterating anything. And so we sort of tore in and went, we're going to build everything. And now 3 years later, you know, you have teams that are highly paid, very talented people balancing Elasticsearch shards, or all their stories are working on Logstash. So it's the commoditization for us. I think we're trying to find that sweet spot of, what do we hand off to Amazon as a managed service? I don't want to balance Elasticsearch shards ever again, so we're going to let you do that. And we just, now it's kind of looking back across the estate and going, oh God, did we build a bunch of legacy stuff that we don't want to support in a couple years? And so it's now finding what can we hand off to Amazon, where, as you said, we're there to deliver these services, not to play with technology, not to do cool new stuff. There is an end game, and I think sometimes when you're all in it and you're fighting those battles and you feel like you're a champion within a department, it's easy to lose sight, and you're like, we're going to build everything, and you shouldn't think twice about what you can hand off as a managed service.
I'm interested in what you're saying, and I've got a follow-up. If you're doing these new modernizing, using new technologies, you've got to change the skill set in your organization. Do you hire outside? Do you train inside? Or do you just force people to accept it and let them do what do you do?
It's been, so the Oracle, maybe I shouldn't have said that. So the proprietary database situations that we deal with in the past.
That was legacy?
There you may have people that are experts in that stack, right? They've been doing PL SQL and stuff for 15 years. And then you rock up and go, yeah, we're not going to do this. We're going to move, and we're going to get away from WebLogic if we can. We're going to get away from all of it. For us, again, it was trying to identify the people who got it and were willing to come along. And we said, look, at the end of the day, you know that this stack is going to be different in 6 months. And your skill set here really isn't going to be. But if you want to learn how to build and run infrastructure on AWS, we'll get you training, which you guys have gladly provided. There's been the either come along for this journey, help us do this, and then we could also, we'll be doing this over and over. So it's not like when you leave this project in a department, you're done, you have no job. We're not going to bring you on to transitioning over and over. And we're heavy with contractors there, which makes it difficult to train up contractors. But certainly the permanent staff, we've tried to identify the ones in the meeting. And I mean, you guys have all encountered this. First, you'll get the resistance, and sometimes it's a unified front. But then you'll get like a little email message from somebody that says, hey, I read something about the cloud, and I am interested. And then it's just really bringing them into the fold and trying to make those teams feel like we're doing it with them. We're not doing it to them. And you know, and it's making those personal connections, I think, and trying to find the ones and then empowering them to do the right thing. But it's never easy when you're telling somebody, you know, fundamentally, I'm going to change the technology stack right out from under you, and we have to do it because it's the right thing. But tact, I suppose.
Okay. Paul, I think we skipped you on the way back, so I'm going to put you on the spot.
All right.
How do you balance security and openness? Because you want to get it all out, right? The Smithsonian.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the data that we work with, I mean, we do want to get it all out. Most of it's research data. A lot of it has been, you know, generated with federal funds. And science nowadays, whether kind of the earlier generation of scientists appreciate it or not, is done out in the open, in my opinion. And so we don't, I mean, there's a whole part of the Smithsonian and the computing effort of the Smithsonian that is dealing with, you know, normal business data and stuff like that, and they have different concerns. But for us, really, you know, rather than worrying so much about our data, we want to have ways to get it out, right? And so the cloud can be a good way to do that, especially for collaborative research projects. Every scientist at the Smithsonian works with a million other scientists from all these different universities, and that can be problematic, in kind of the traditional way of doing things. But being able to leverage the cloud and work together on some of these projects, especially things like genomics, which is a big effort for us, cloud makes it a lot easier, actually. So maybe the wrong person to ask about security, but we're happy to.
I want to contrast. I'm going to contrast, and I'm going to ask Sarah the same thing, because you want to keep it all private. How do you balance between security and openness?
Yeah, our whole data set is, PII, personally identifiable information. And so security is a huge thing for us. And I'm just lucky that I spent a huge part of my career in the IT security field. And actually at USCIS, I spent 4 years automating all the security prior to coming onto this project, to being asked to come onto this project. So I helped build sort of came up with the methodology for how we were going to secure things in AWS and how we were going to think about the cloud, and went through all of those approval processes and was a part of the entire team that stood up, our first cloud presence. And so for us, I guess we were already sort of like mentally there, the team, but I would say that it's very different, and it's not just a layered approach. It's a very different way to think about data when you're in the cloud. I would say that it enables you to be much more secure, much more quickly, and to react more quickly to any kind of security events in ways that you never would have been able to in a data center, or it would have taken years, like he said, to build it in the data center. I totally agreed with what you said about 2 to 3 years to stand up the server and how much faster it is in AWS. And I think with what you said, with bringing people around, one of the best ways to bring them around was to show them how much faster and how much more empowered they were to build things and provide immediate value to the customers. And so for us, wrapping all of those three things together, for security, it's better. It's a better security approach. We're able to log way more data than we ever logged previously, and store it really cheaply. We're able to, all of our security scanning is like daily for every single asset, and we have all kinds of other cool tools that we've implemented, and I won't say what they are, but cool tools, for monitoring changes and things that are happening to our systems. For us, obviously, since we've achieved continuous deployment, nobody touches the production servers ever. We have 0 downtime deployments. It's just automatic all the time. And so there's nobody touching the production stuff. And if anybody does, if there's any change or anybody goes in there, it's like automatically logged and somebody knows immediately. There's an alert. And then I'm getting an email like, what happened in such and such? You made this change. All the changes go through the pipeline though. So there is no human doing anything.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have hit the magical 20-minute mark. Do I have questions? I have more questions. But I would love to get questions from the audience, and I will walk around with the microphone. Please raise your hand if you have questions that you would like to ask the panel. And thank you for being the brave volunteer for the first question.
Thanks. So I think this one's for Sarah. A lot of the discussion is about the migration, and that's obviously very important. In immigration, I think the standard is about 3 years for someone to come in and effectively go through the entire process and get a residency. And I'm curious, as part of the metrics discussion, do you anticipate that through some of the activities you've done in either migrating to the cloud or revamping the app, that migration will become faster and vetting will become better?
Are you saying migration to the cloud for other applications will be faster, or are you saying that immigration processes will be faster?
Immigration process.
That's a great question. So we are currently working on a new endeavor right now, and we've actually gotten pretty far along with it. We're building a person-centric service, and the reason why I'm building it is because we needed, as a part of our verification modernization, we realized that part of the reason we had a lot of manual cases, and if we get mandatory e-verify, those people will not be able to support the number of manual cases that would come over. So we looked at the algorithms, and there were definitely improvements that we've made there, and we've significantly improved the number of cases going to manual processes. But we also found that, you know, a lot of the reason was because of the bad data that was coming from all these different systems throughout USCIS. And so we decided to bring on some data scientists, which I think are really cool and fun to work with, and look at the data to understand what was going on there. And that turned into this huge entity resolution person-centric service project. And so at this point, within about 4 to 5 months, and the cloud's definitely enabled us to do this so quickly, we have resolved 94% of all of the entities across the all of the data that we have, which is about 835 million records. And so we think at the end we'll be down to about 60 to 80 million, you know, final resolved entities. And so we're going to take that, and then we're going to build this person-centric service. And what we're doing now is, of course, we built it a lot faster than we realized without, you know, having as many communications with the business as we should have. So now we're having all of those meetings, and we're looking at where can we track the metrics where we can speed things up in the immigration processes, which really isn't a verification thing, but this system will greatly serve verification as well, because it will enhance, you know, the answers that we're giving back, ensuring that we have, you know, good data and good answers back, and it'll greatly minimize the number of manual, how many cases are going to the manual processes. So for immigration, though, like, it's endless, the possibilities, and how great it's going to serve that. And so I do think it will reduce those processes for sure in the long run.
Thank you for asking the first question. We've got another one up front.
So I think, Carl, you alluded to this sort of decision process earlier. But like, once you've moved into the cloud, how do you identify which managed services that you should go in on versus the ones that maybe you should build yourself? Is this sort of like a, you know, cattle versus pet sort of thing? Are you all in on managed services, or what's your perspective, any of you, on that?
Yeah, I can take that. So for me, when I was the head of infrastructure at GovUK, and I just clocked it in the backlog. I started noticing that there were more and more stories being worked that were Elasticsearch, Logstash, and for me, that was it. It was just what stories are they playing every week or every sprint, and started paying attention to the percentage of those that weren't delivering new features or making improvements, but were, I mean, I guess they're improvements, they're tuning things, they're keeping stuff scalable, but it wasn't the kind of iteration that we had hoped for. So yeah, I just honestly had watched the backlog, kept very closely to the stories being played in the backlog, and once they hit a threshold of 30 or 40% of our time was being spent on that stuff, we said, all right, can we go in on a proper managed service here? Do we trust it? Then sometimes you get some more assurance and compliance and accreditation stuff when you're sort of weaving yourself in. One of the challenges, I think we didn't think about it. It wasn't just that we were cocky and wanted to build everything, although that was certainly true to some degree. I think it was trying to understand how do we, if you have a whole series of all of these features available to you and you want to incorporate, like, how do you even begin to prioritize those? And so that was coming in with compliance and people like that knowing, again, making the allies, making the connections, and through demonstrating, being able to say, okay, we're going to prioritize this thing. Vendor lock-in was the thing that we would hear all the time, right? People would say, well, you can't do that. You can't use, what about that Lambda? That's one that we hear often now. You do that serverless thing, aren't you locking into that technology? Government, we're very worried about that. But I think now we've matured beyond that. We're locking in to a certain degree, but if we have containerized, easy apps that can move, basically what we would do is say, if we had to go to other supplier X, we already have the containerized app. What are we getting right now out of AWS? So we've got really good logging, we've got audit trail, we've got IAM policies, all this magic. Yes, it would take some time to go to another stack and you know, or reorchestrate all that. But at the end of the day, it's not vendor lock-in like it was for the old proprietary database kind of thing, where you had stagnation. I mean, you're locking into a vendor that releases 1,500 features a year or whatever. So, you know, is it really lock-in? And as long as I think you're honest with yourself about the amount of time you would need to make that move, then you can justify going in with managed services in that way.
We started a little bit differently just because of a scale issue, right? I mean, 700,000 endpoints, over 2,000 business systems, large amount of weapon systems, and so we really focused on, we had a global application that we had that provided a couple shared services, identity management services, security services, kind of audit and privilege users, really about 5 or 6 main services, and that's what we had tried to deliver as an enterprise to across the Air Force space. I think eventually we'll get to having to rationalize what's next, enterprise search and elastic storage, all that kind of stuff we'll get to. But right now, we're really focused on providing global, at-scale enterprise services for those things that we know need to be consumed by every application. Because for us, every application that comes in that rebuilds identity services or rebuilds, that is just lost cost. It is lost opportunity. So we've kind of gone horizontal with 5 major services, and then we're going to build depth probably based on use case and where the functional applications are.
All right, love the questions coming from the audience. We got another one up here. I don't know if you're just rubbing your hair or a question. Okay, you're on the spot for the next one.
Thank you very much. In listening to each one of you, each one of you are pioneering some things within the cloud, and it occurs to me that some of the benefits that you can provide is not only within your own agencies, but taking either those work processes or tools, or like what you were talking about with the data sets, and taking some of the analytical tools and making that available to a wider organization. So I'd like to hear each of your each of your thoughts on that, because I fully understand there are things that you're doing within your own organization you probably don't want to publish to everyone, but there's other areas where we're seeing some rework within government organizations, and I'd love to hear how you can use the cloud to make it so that a broader community could benefit from the work that each one of you are doing.
Yeah. So from the research world, I mean, that's super important, and one of the huge reasons that we like the cloud, right? So some of these data analytics pipelines or data science pipelines have all these complicated steps and lots of dependencies. I mean, it's easy to just get bogged down trying to install the thing. And so having a way to easily share like an Amazon S3 image or containerize it into a Docker container and share those workflows, and then have the exact same setup for your friend that's, you know, over in Brazil or something and wants to run the exact same pipeline, piece of cake. So it's really important for us. And I think we also, all the software development we're doing is open source and in the open GitHub. And so we can point people to exactly what's happening, and they can give them instructions on what we do in Amazon Web Services. They can do the exact same thing, get the exact same results. Super important for research and science. So that was actually one of the big reasons that we wanted to explore it, as opposed to like an HPC system or something.
So we're going across the gamut. So one of the big applications we use with Amazon is a program called OCX, which is our GPS management. On the R&D side of the research and development side of it, a big movement of how do you go at scale, and so we got speed, agility, and scale when we did that application. We were having lots of troubles doing on-prem approach there. So in the R&D space, we've got actual applications going right now in the regular operational space. So logistics, HR, big, huge movements there. Again, from an application space, put it on shared infrastructure and deliver at scale. Also on the SaaS PaaS side of it, I mentioned the Office 365 work that we're doing. We have a managed SaaS solution that we have also. The main focus for us, I would say, is say thank you to all the cloud providers that are really focused on the FedRAMP and FedRAMP Plus. That is where the DoD space is. We have certain laws and regulations that don't allow us to do just purely public most cases. So that is a big disclaimer right there. So a lot of those business systems and weapon systems, we're leveraging all of the FedRAMP Plus type solutions, and we're literally doing it on the IAS side, the PaaS side, and the SaaS side. So there's building blocks across all those, and we're going to maximize utilization of all of them.
Building blocks, that's exactly where we've come from for reuse. I think our government has taken a few approaches. We tried to do make widely available services, like we have there's a GovUK Pay, which any of us can plug into, big API-driven thing. But within the department, we're certainly, it's just been as simple as CloudFormation templates right now. So once we do the hard work to find a good way to profile, it's a simple app, couple containers, S3 bucket, whatever, we can go to our NCSC, which are our cyber people. They'll have a look at it and go, yeah, that looks pretty good, and then we can make that available for everybody. Then if everybody's using that, we make a change. They come to us, they want us to tweak something, they want to pick up some other logs or whatever. It's just as simple as updating that CloudFormation. I mean, you guys know in the old world that would have taken 5 years, and how many negotiations with your system integrators to make one little tweak. So again, I know I keep going back to flexibility, but it's preventing reuse in that way, and you kind of continually iterate towards something better, and it's not everybody just going doing the same thing over and over.
And I just want to add to that I feel like there's this sense from the integrators of fear that we're going to be taking work away from them. And the reality is that's not true. The reality is we're going to turn around and we're going to reappropriate those funds to getting more work done. And so we're going to be much faster, much better, and we're going to have way better value to our customers. We'll get things done that would have taken us 20 years before in a year, and that's really where we're going with that.
Yep. And in those templates, you can use them internal product
Yes.
teams, and you can have suppliers use them too, right?
Yes.
It's like we expect you to use this CloudFormation template when you're building that kind of an application profile. So.
All right, we have time for a couple more questions. See a hand back here.
Sure, just for William and Sarah, just because I know you guys have a lot of infrastructure and everything. Prior to going to the cloud, if you had to guess, how many servers per year were you procuring before the cloud, and how many servers now per year are you procuring?
Do you want to answer that?
So our current numbers, and I'm not going to talk servers, I'm going to talk data centers, is over 1,700. Now that definition is very, very broad, but in context, you can imagine how many servers that is. Again, just on the business system side, so just think logistics, HR, those kind of things, well over 2,000 applications. Those are large-scale applications, global, enterprise, continental, and non-continental, U.S. Weapon systems, F-35 systems, F-22 logistics systems, all of those kind of things. So we are at very global scale, and again, I think that's one of the core benefits of cloud is everything we do, I've got to worry about the Pacific, I've got to worry about the European theater, I have to worry about the CONUS theater. And so even if I take out the CONUS theater, because a lot of the FedRAMP pieces are really focused on CONUS right now, even if I can take out the CONUS, it's 3/4 the problem at global scale. And so we're literally in the thousands and tens of thousands and plus up of servers. And honestly, we find more every day just because we're such a large enterprise. I can't imagine what the Army's like. The Army's about a third bigger than the Air Force. So between the two of us, about 2 million end users. That hurts a lot of heads. It hurts mine every day. And so the scale is really key. So count really drives into agility, into acquisitions, into speed. And there is a time value of money that we actually have to take very seriously. We should have taken it more seriously 10 years ago. We're really taking it really seriously now.
Yeah, so I think with us, we care less about number of servers and more about usage. Because what we do is we're using Docker containers, so we have our spin up and spin down completely automated, and the steps are just, it's all automatic. So we spin up an environment when we need it and spin it back down when we're done. And so I would say in some ways we're even using more servers because we're able to do so many more things now than we were able to do before. Before, in order to do a project, just to procure the servers would take like a year. And so we are more empowered to do projects that we never, and look at the data and look at the systems in a way that we've never been able to do before. Now we are tracking the metrics on all of these systems, which we could never do that before. It would take us a really long time. It would be a lot harder, because of the infrastructure and because of just all of the integration and everything else. So that's how I'll answer that.
All right, so we probably have time for one more, maybe two.
Hi there, how are you? I think there's this, when it comes to data, I think the more easy it is to store, I think the more enterprises have the tendency to maybe collect a little bit too much. And you're talking about a wide variety of applications that are bringing in data. Like F-35s are going to bring in a hell of a lot different types of information than any other type of application would. So how do you approach that from an infrastructure perspective, or a cloud perspective, of ensuring that you're collecting what you need and not collecting everything you can?
Good question.
Don't we need everything? No, just kidding. It can be difficult. We are actually driven by rules and data protection stuff in the EU. So we have to clean and purge stuff. In some cases, I wish I could hang on to it because I want that historical data for all sorts of reasons. But we're often driven by just EU policy that we have to purge some things. There are some things you can do, scrub some data and hang on to some, there are other things I care about where I can remove all the personally identifiable information. I can still sort of keep that data set for future. But in many cases, I'm pushed by the policy. I think I would probably keep data for a very long time, and especially with things like Glacier, where I could bounce it up to someplace even cheaper. I'd be interested in having historical since the beginning of time if I could, but it's just
I agree. We're bound by laws for how long we must keep data and how often we must purge it as well. So depending on the type of data. But I think that storing more data is important, and that you really learn from that. Like you're able to do different things with that data and learn things. And so I think more data is, the cheaper it is, we should be saving more data, not less.
I know I've talked a lot about scale, but you can imagine how much fuel we use in an F-22 and F-35. It's actually, fuel consumption is our #1 cost in the large billions in money and fuel every year. And so the F-22, the 35, the preventive maintenance, all those things that commercial airlines use to forecast when you have to put it in for repair, but even more so the optimization of those weapon systems, not just from a combat perspective, but from a logistics. We don't keep enough of that today, so I think we are going to have to figure out what the right rule sets are. I think we're early on in that, but you have to do the business case, right? Because there's so much money to be saved if we save the right data to really improve both operationally and logistics. And I think we're maturing through that. I think it sounds like we're all going through the same thing, and so we're here today, which is very little that we're keeping. We have the capability to, and so the matter is going to be, where is it cost optimized to say, I know I need to keep 35 data, but I only have to do it 30 days, or I need it 180 days. But right now, the cost to save it is the benefit. I would err on this side much more, just simply because the cost benefits of it operationally are so significant.
Well, we are ending the end of the entire summit. I would like to ask each of you for closing comments. What's next with your organization's modernization effort? Sarah?
Well, I guess I already gave it away earlier. We're working on the person-centric service, so that's what's next.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, so I think we want to try to do a lot more in the cloud with analytics and data science, especially in kind of biodiversity genomics, this area that we're spending a lot of time on. And we've just kind of scratched the surface. We've been really happy with the results, so we're stoked to keep going. And there's a lot to do, so.
Good.
Yeah.
Bill?
Ours really is on the big data discussion around logistics and readiness. So if you read our secretary's testimony, we have a core concern around operational readiness from logistics to personnel. And so being able to get the big data analytics behind that, put it on top of our systems, and really start to mine data at a level that we've never been able to at scale is really our principal next focus.
All right.
For us, it is, we have an ambition to move all of our, we have official, secret, and top secret are our classifications of data, all official apps and services to public cloud by 2020. It's about 1,400, but now that I heard you have 1,400 data centers, I feel much better about that. Much better. Right? So yeah, I think we're good.
Maybe
I feel pretty good too.
Get more. You could have a more aggressive
Thanks for
goal.
sharing.
Yeah, really. Wow.
Well, can I ask everyone to thank the panelists not only for their participation today, but for their public service, and then with an applause. And I'd like to thank all of you for attending the AWS Public Sector Summit. I'd like to ask you back for next year, and please give us feedback on what you liked, what we could improve on, and what additional information you'd like to go home with. So thank you all for attending. Thank you, panelists. Great discussion.
Thanks for having me.